Good morning. The title of my presentation is Drawing Inspirations, the Mingling of European and Asian Art Traditions in the Boxer Codex Illustrations. My name is Clio Tantoco, and I'm a graduate student from the University of the Philippines. The Boxer Codex is a fascinating document from the late 16th century about the inhabitants of the Philippines, China, and some neighboring Southeast Asian islands, possibly commissioned by Gomez and Luis Perez Dasmariñas and drawn by a Chinese artist. Most analysis of the Boxer Codex consider it as an ethnographic account and study the people it talks about and what it says about how they lived. Scholars are also particularly interested in the appearance of gold artifacts adorning the Tagalog, Visayan, and Cagayan peoples, illustrated in the Codex. Others have studied the representations of the peoples depicted in the work, how accurate they are, for what purpose they were depicted in that way, and whether there was any prejudice behind those forms. Some have simply described the formal elements present in the manuscript. For example, Charles Boxer mentions the use of margin designs similar to the borders of the Book of Hours, illuminated manuscript, and of arabesques. This study is interested in isolating the styles and characteristics of the two prominent art traditions in the Boxer Codex illustrations, which are European manuscript illumination and Chinese painting, in order to identify what elements were mixed, what effect they have when they are combined, and what possible intentions the compilers, authors, and especially the artists had in mind in combining these two styles. Here are a few pages of illustrations from the Boxer Codex. It opens with a fold-out scene at the sea, followed by a succession of human figures labeled as different peoples residing in the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and China, and mythical Chinese gods and creatures. The Chinese painting techniques in the Boxer Codex are closer to the representational style of painting associated with the northern school landscapes in the southern song painting tradition of the Ming Dynasty period. Around the 16th century, Chinese landscape painting was divided by the scholar Tung Chi Chang into abstract and representational styles, known respectively as the Northern and Southern schools. Southern school paintings are rhythmic pictures made by literati painters interested in conveying the essence and so-called true meaning of things. It emphasizes a more abstract and impressionistic use of contours and lines. The abstract paintings of the literati are more recognized as they wrote much about their own artworks. Meanwhile, the Northern school paintings were known to be tonal pictures, applying color gradation and clear lines. Its practitioners included the professional court painters or academy painters. Despite producing more detailed drawings, they were regarded disdainfully by the scholars because of their preference for realism and capturing likeness. This division persisted into other genres and into the succeeding periods of Chinese painting under different namings and groupings. In the Song Dynasty period, James Cahill describes the Northern Song as being more well known for abstract works by the literati painters, while the Southern Song followed the representational canons of the professional painters. On the other hand, illuminated manuscripts are highly decorative, handwritten books common in Europe around the late medieval period, which were adorned with illuminations or gold and silver leaf and brightly colored paints that light up the pages. In the 13th to 14th centuries, illumination was widely applied to sacred Christian texts. The art of illumination is distinguished into several more categories based on style, subject matter, or place of origin. In the Boxer Codex illustrations, neorealistic representation, tonality, and clearly drawn outlines are more prominently observed in the way the clothes, hair, and feathers are outlined, as seen in the beard of the Chinese god shown on the right. Calligraphic brush techniques that create rough and harsh lines are barely used in the drawings. If at all used, it is only to add lifelike details, as in the bird's tail feathers shown here. Wash technique is more commonly used throughout the codex, as seen in the soft gradations of color from light to dark on clothes and on human skin. Lastly, the Boxer Codex illustrations show lifelike tone and atmosphere. The subjects are drawn either in dynamic and angled poses, depicting movement, instead of being stationary or posed. Human figures appear to be in the middle of a walk or are engaged in other types of actions. Texture lines, common to both representational and abstract painting styles, can also be seen in the sail and sea in the opening illustration of the codex. Here, however, the lines of the sea create the illusion of waves in motion. Surrounding the Chinese influenced drawings are four unique border illuminations decorating the margins of the pages. They feature floral patterns, butterflies, birds, a fox like animal, and arabesque or curvilinear patterns. Gold is used to line the edges of the flowers or is dotted on the figures found on the margins of the pages, as on the blue and red flowers shown here. It is also used to outline the titles of the illustrations, typical of illuminated manuscripts, as doing so emphasizes the parts that need to be read. More noticeable, though, is its application on human figures as coloring for their gold accessories. An examination of the illustrations in the Boxer Codex reveal that its artist was exploring techniques of European illuminated manuscripts and combining them with the canons of Chinese representational painting, similar to those found in the Northern School landscape tradition and the Southern song painting tradition. To the researcher, this convergence implies 1. The eagerness of Chinese artisans to supplement and improve their own artistic vocabularies. 2. The use of complementary painting styles to balance perceptions for the purpose of commerce. And 3. Mutual fascination and respect for cultures between the Chinese artist and Spanish compiler, and for the Southeast Asians described and depicted in the Codex in this early East West encounter in Asia. The Chinese artists for the Codex may have seen the styles and motifs of European manuscript illumination as a fitting style to supplement and improve their own painting techniques. In the 16th century, the writer and dramatist Cao Lian lamented that Chinese painting fell into a dilemma of lack of originality, as either styles of the northern and southern schools had gone stale. An obsessive search for originality in Chinese painting continued on until the 17th century. Under these circumstances, it is likely that Chinese painters of Parian, perhaps including the artists commissioned, were themselves seeking new techniques and styles to reinvigorate their art. Analyzing the choice of subject matter and juxtapositions in the Codex, Elensche writes, quote, the Boxer Codex might have sought to highlight Spain's primary business partners and to demonstrate Manila's commercial potential to its intended audience. End quote. The complementary use of illumination in Chinese representational painting in the illustrations visualizes this business oriented perspective towards the manuscript subjects. Drawing in signs of wealth alongside war costumes and weapons seems as if it is assessing the pros and cons of establishing trade with the region's peoples, as well as the richness and poverty of each location. Illumination adds ornamentation and a fantastic aura to the drawings, while the representational quality of Chinese painting gives the drawings a sense of realness and thus credibility, which would guide the reaction of the king or the official to whom the codex would have been gifted. Furthermore, the general atmosphere towards the varied cultures that were meeting each other in Asia in the 16th century was still at the stage of fascination and curiosity. The Desmariñeses who had commissioned the work of the compiler must have held Chinese artistry and craftsmanship in high regard in order to have availed of their services in fashioning the detailed codex for the king. Edgar Wickberg's Chinese in Philippine Life mentions that Chinese artisans began migrating to the Philippine Islands as early as the Spanish established their colonial authority here. They were therefore many and easy to hire. Albert Chan also notes that besides being available and cheaper to work with, than other nationalities. The Spanish did recognize the skillfulness of Chinese artisans. Meanwhile, for the Chinese artists, the effort put into learning new styles, techniques, and motifs to depict their subjects in the best possible light may have been not only a manifestation of the artist's dedication to their craft, but also of respect towards the peoples and cultures they are depicting. The lens of Orientalism is often used when looking at illustrations created or sponsored by Westerners about Asia. But illustrations ought to be read not just from the historians or ethnographers, but also from the artist's point of view. The Boxer Codex is a special case, as it is in fact a collaboration between the Western patrons and authors and their Asian artists. Not every image created by a foreign power should be viewed as images of discrimination, condescension, or disdain for the ones depicted. Sometimes perceived faults or mistakes in the drawings may just be signs of its artist's limited visual and artistic vocabularies. The attempt to find new ways of illustrating the world's peoples by learning and taking techniques from outside one's own culture and artistic library, as seen in the Boxer Codex illustrations, shows an instance of an artist's struggle to find the right styles, strokes, and colors to present balanced depictions of their foreign subjects. The more familiar narrative in art history is that which focuses on the transformation of Western art by learning and adding styles from outside its circle. Because of this, we are more accustomed to hearing about how Western artists import and adapt styles and traditions from Asian art forms. Stylistic hybrids born out of Europe, which take inspiration from Asia, like Japonism, Art Nouveau, and Impressionism, are more commonly talked about. The mixing of European and Chinese art in the Boxer Codex illustrations is an inversion of this narrative, as it shows a Chinese artist adopting techniques from European illuminated manuscripts. This reminds us that cultural exchange and transformation always go and ought to be discussed both ways. This study also hopes to have underlined the contribution of the Chinese representational painter or artisan painter in art history, although they are less appreciated than their literati counterparts. Professional, artisan, and academy painters who fall under the Northern School or Southern Song traditions produce clearly defined paintings, which are visually appealing and easy to understand, and thus more accessible to a wider group of audiences. These professional painters relied on technique rather than feeling, and were more flexible and quicker in accepting, learning, and adapting foreign styles and techniques into their works. It would be interesting to see how this flexibility and willingness to adapt in the name of craftsmanship contributed to the changes seen in Chinese painting and East Asian painting in later centuries. This ends my presentation. Thank you very much.